We look outside here.
Yeah.
I will get you out of every 20 cars.
Yeah.
You won't find one hybrid. You won't find one diesel.
Yeah.
You won't find one electric car in a city that is comparatively flat. Same could be said for Beijing. Places that seem to be built for alternative forms. Is this because of automobiles industry as an interest group, or because of the petroleum industry, or other? Why is it seems to an outsider, China compared to Europe, been slow to adopt to more energy efficient forms of transportation, particularly in an industry that's growing so fast?
In fact, China has had incredibly aggressive fuel efficiency standards in its vehicle industry. It had higher fuel efficiency standards than the United States. The U.S. has recently enacted new standards, but until a few years ago, China was actually ahead of the U.S. in terms of new cars, the required fuel efficiency. You have a developing country, you have an urbanizing country, and it depends. It is designed around the car, just like in Western urban development, which is maybe not the smartest thing to do, but it's a typical thing to do. And so you have incredible growth in the vehicle population, like 15 to 20% a year. That's astonishing compared to Western countries. Your point about there not being very many electric cars or hybrid is a good point, and it's a little bit surprising that the penetration of electric and hybrid cars is as slow as it has been in China to date. But the government is actually trying to put in incentives to change that, and as you know, there are electric car manufacturers in China.
Looking forward to the potential for hybrid vehicles. I don't think that natural gas actually is a potential solution to the transportation issue in China. China doesn't have a lot of natural gas. It depends on imports, and they're increasing. That, I think, is the way to move forward. In terms of the traffic problems and the air quality problems, part of the issue here in major Chinese cities, at least as I understand it, is congestion. The fact that you have an increasing number of cars on the road. Increasingly, they're stationary, trying to get through the next blockade.
I've been there.
And if they're stationary, they're also pumping pollution into the environment. So part of the contribution to the air quality issue is coming from cars that are simply, not moving but wasting energy. So if you had, for example, the simple technology that's available in a Toyota Prius, for example, where you simply, the car stops functioning when it's stationary, that would be a step forward. But we have to go even more aggressively forward. The Chinese government made a decision to try to improve the efficiency of coal-fired electricity generation, particularly in northern China, by investing in what's called combined heat and power systems. Namely, you need hot water to heat houses in winter, so you actually get the hot water at the same time that you're producing the electricity from coal. But in the same region, they have invested an enormous amount of resources in wind turbines. So China now has the world's largest array of wind turbines, more than the United States, but it produces less electricity from wind than the US does. Why? In winter, in this particular region, because you have to have the hot water in order to heat the houses, you have to keep running the coal-fired power plants, which means that you don't need the electricity from the wind farm. China has significant wind resources. China has the opportunity to develop those wind resources and with the infrastructure that you need to actually use it. What that means is that you have to be able to transmit the electricity from where you produce it to where you need it. But since the Chinese energy economy is still in a growth phase, you can actually efficiently imagine doing that. You can build wind farms offshore and bring the power onshore to where the big demand is, rather than mining coal in the north, shipping it by rail to the coast and bringing it down to Shanghai. I mean, there are better ways to do things. Wind is a real possibility to move forward. Now, the Chinese government has also made a commitment to building its nuclear industry in a major way. I don't frankly think that that's going to solve the problems. I don't think it's a cost-effective way to move forward, but they're going to do a little bit of everything in order to do it. The major bet that the government is making for the future of renewable energy is in hydro. And I've been working on a book on Chinese energy recently, and just finished writing a chapter on hydro. One of the astonishing things about hydro in China is that the plan is to develop hydro to the point where it makes a major contribution to the goal of reducing the carbon content of China's energy economy by 15% by 2020. That's a hell of a big plan to do.
Mhm.
We're going to reduce the amount of carbon emitted by 15% relative to the total. Hydro is regarded as an important way forward. But when you start looking at it, where is the hydro coming from? Almost all of that hydro is being produced by precipitation in the Tibetan Plateau. In a
Yes.
relatively small region of the Tibetan Plateau, which is feeding the major east-west Chinese rivers and also feeding the major north-south rivers,
Right.
the Brahmaputra and the Mekong. And the Chinese plans are to dam the upper reaches of the Yangtze, the Jiangsu, to dam essentially all of these three major rivers going to the south, and to increase the production of electricity from that. But, you know, in 2011, China in that particular region of Tibet had a major drought. It was a 50-year drought. The flow of water in
And
the
it's the
Yangtze...
worst drought in 50 years.
50 years. The flow of water in the Yangtze decreased to the point where electricity generation from the Three Gorges decreased very significantly. So if you start thinking about the future, you know, it's going to depend to a significant extent on what kind of a climate there is, and can you predict what it's going to be. So if the climate turns out to be in that source region of that water, if it turns out to be very dry, you've made an enormous investment in a resource that's not going to pay off. So that's another part of the challenge that China faces.